Here's our Canucks reporter, one half of the rink-wide duo with Andrew Wadden. We say good afternoon to Jeff Paterson. What time did you pull in to the driveway in North Van last night, Jeff?
Well, yeah, I couldn't get a car out on the street around Rogers Arena, so I hoofed back to the studio.
Did you? Yeah.
Did post-game pod last night, and yes, there was plenty to dig into, and I know we'll get to a lot of it here. I got it back into North Van in my home just after 1 a.m., and it was coming down pretty good then, but I was surprised to awake to just the sheer volume of snow that fell overnight. So I've done some shoveling already today, and my guess is I'll probably do some more before this day is through.
Well, you and I yesterday, too, were playing the practice guessing game. Like, is he going to give him Tuesday off, or is he going to give him Wednesday off with, the games coming up Thursday and Friday? Wise choice, Coach, to give them this day off. I suspect they'll be back on the practice ice tomorrow after another 5-1 loss at home, Jeff. Oh, my God, 5-1 at home.
It's bad.
It's
really bad. It is. I feel for the fan base. They deserve just so much more. It's hard to explain, it's hard to watch, it's hard to stomach, but it's all unfolding there in front of our eyes. And, the last 3 home games, they've scored 2 goals. 3-0 shutout loss to Minnesota, and then the 5-1s. And, of course, these 5-1s follow on the heels of the other 5-1s. 15 home games, and 5 of them have ended in 5-1 losses for the Vancouver Canucks. Guys, they have 5 home ice wins and 5 5-1 losses. 15 games into the home schedule. It truly is incredible, and so many of them look so similar. And last night was just appalling and so startling to be there in the building and watch, but I'm sure it looked the same to anybody that watched it on TV. The amount of time and space that the St. Louis Blues had when they had the puck on their sticks, and you look at who did the damage. And it was kind of like when Montreal came in here. The Blues aren't the same team that won the Cup in 2019. They have a lot of the same pieces, but they're not that same team. But Jordan Kyrou and Robert Thomas lead this team, like 2 young guys, stars in the making in the National Hockey League. And it was the same with Montreal. Don't let Suzuki and Caulfield beat you. And look who scored the first 2 goals for the Habs that night. It was Caulfield and Suzuki. And last night, Jordan Kyrou runs wild. How Robert Thomas only has 8 goals on the season after that shot last night.
I love that player. I can't believe he's that low in goal scoring.
Blake, the number of times that he just knifed through the Canucks defense to gain access to the zone, and then the Blues went to town. But ultimately, it was the shooters with the time and space they had. Guys, this is the NHL. Like, you can say, hey, the Canucks needed some saves, and they did. But even the Nathan Walker goal in his first of the season, not a noted goal scorer, again, these guys are the best in the world at what they do. You give them that much time and space, they're going to pick their corners. They're going to pick their spots. It seems like there is now a book on Spencer Martin. He's enough of a body of work. Everybody's going high glove. And last night, the Blues found the mark there. But again, how this team can be just so lax defensively, not to close on guys. We always talk about gap control and those types of things. And last night was just an absolute exhibition in how not to defend at the National Hockey League level, and they got punished for it, and they got exactly what they deserved.
It's crazy to think that a couple of games ago they were at the 500 mark, and effectively their high water mark of the season with any sort of sample size, when so many stats point to them being like a bottom 5 team in the league. You brought up this stat before in previous swirls around the drain. The last time an opposition team didn't take a point off the Vancouver Canucks was November the 26th. We are near a month where every game the Canucks give the opposition points. That's a huge boost to the teams they're facing, and it makes it almost impossible to make up ground in the standings when a loss is an outright loss and you lose ground. And even in wins, you don't get the 2-point bump because you're giving the other guys points.
Right. So just to underscore that point, the Canucks are 5-5 in their last 10 games. So 5 wins, 5 losses. The Canucks have picked up 10 points. Their opponents have picked up 15 in that same stretch because the Canucks have not won a game in regulation time. So it just, when they lose, they lose. And when they win, they're barely. Yeah, well, they do lose ground. They're 7 full points back of the wild card spot now. And I don't want to turn this into a daily look at the standings, but it just underscores they haven't played a lot here in the last 2 weeks, right? They've had this sort of college schedule. They have one victory in their last 2 weeks. And when that happens, everybody is in the passing lane and zipping past you. And all of a sudden, where, as you said, they were at NHL 500, they kept telling you they were within arm's reach, they were all those teams around them. And yet at the outset of the month, we said this is such an important stretch for them if they are going to be legitimately in this thing, all these Western opponents. And they just keep flushing game after game, and the one win they had was a shootout in Calgary, so the Flames got a single point out of that, and all of a sudden now, 7 full points back of the wild card, and it gets late early in the National Hockey League, and they're only 31 games in, but that's just a ton of ground to make up again, and in some ways it feels like they're right back to where they were with the 0-5-2 start.
Yeah, you're quite right. So, I mean, 7 back is pretty alarming. You need to get on a run awfully soon if you're still going to be.
Well, as Shorty pointed out on the broadcast last night, guys, they're actually further behind this year than they were last year from the playoff spot, and they were already into the Bruce bump at this point last year. So they were already starting to play better, and yet they are further behind now. So that just tells you they probably have to play, starting today, 670 hockey the rest of the way. I don't think it's happening.
I've done the math here. My math tells me that this team, 51 games remaining, can probably afford 18 outright losses in their final 51 games. Think about that for a sec. So they got to go 33-18 over their final 51 games. Does anybody see this team? They can't put more than 3 wins together, and when they do, it's against Arizona and San Jose. The odds are just so stacked against them. And it's funny, too, Blake, you mentioned sort of year over year. Like, the house cleaning was early December, then came the Bruce bump. They went into Christmas with some actual positive vibes a year ago. Mm-hmm. Like, to the stark contrast to where we sit here with 2 games left before the short Christmas break is incredible.
You asked Bruce Boudreau a fantastic question about keeping his optimism yesterday. Tell us about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, we know Bruce. Like, he just oozes positivity. And that's his disposition. And it served him well all these years in the sport. It probably served him well as a player when he was repeatedly sent to the minors and just kept believing that he was going to get a chance to make it in the big leagues, and then as a coach. But when you give up 5 on the regular, as they have in 14 of those 31 games, which is just such an incredible indictment of the way this team defends, I said, what gives you belief, coach, that this can be different? Because in the previous answer, can't remember what the question was, he said, when we pull ourselves out of this, and again, some of that's coach speak, but I just said, you're a positive guy by nature, but what gives you this belief? And he said, it's because that's the way it's always been. And he said, I've never had a losing season, so I just believe that we are going to get things sorted out. And again, this guy has made a living as a coach being brought in to repair damaged franchises, right? That's what he has done. He's done it in other stops. He did it here last year. But this is different because last year's team couldn't score goals, but it could defend. And it had a goaltender that was playing at an all-star level. And they certainly don't have that. And so he was out of answers last night. He rambled as much as we've been around Bruce for a year now, and he loves to speak. But he was just speaking in circles last night because, like so many others, he's searching. He's talking, hoping that he hits on something that he truly can latch onto. And so it's fine to say you believe because it's always happened in the past, but this is different. And with the way that they defend, just believing isn't enough. Something ultimately does have to change.
The 2 UFAs to be were pretty, pretty stunned and at a loss for words. Luke Schenn and Bo Horvat, 2 guys that have got a lot to come in the next few months. There's going to be a new chapter written for these players here soon. You'd have to think one way or the other, and perhaps because of that, it was like they had true serum a little bit last night. Those 2.
Yeah. So there's always sort of that 10-minute gap after the game before the media is invited in and the doors open. And last night, went into the media room, and there was Bo standing at the front of the room, arms crossed, knowing what was coming. And just the body language said everything. I don't think anybody really had to ask him a question. Mm-hmm. He stands in there, he dutifully answers. But his first answer last night was, I don't know what to tell you guys. I'm out of answers. And it looks that way on the ice. It looks that way in the locker room afterwards. all of these 5-1 losses, they look and feel the same. And so, he's been incredible, at least on the production side, not last night, but, you can't knock Bo Horvat for his performance most of the time, but this is on his watch. He is the captain of the Vancouver Canucks, and he wasn't good enough. Nobody was good enough. And so, him and Luke Schenn last night, two of the guys that stood in there and tried to explain it away. And, we've heard from Luke Schenn in the past. Like, he's not afraid to sort of call out the group. He didn't do it by name, but basically just said, like, nobody's willing to go to the hard areas of the ice. Nobody's willing to pay any sort of price. The other night, 5 blocked shots against the Winnipeg Jets? Like, that sort of told the story. There were a few more last night, and they were more invested, guys. Like, the start of the hockey game last night, right? They were out shooting the Blues 7-1. Like, it was scoreless 30 minutes into the hockey game. They were better. It was a remarkably low bar set on Saturday, but they did seem more invested last night. But it's incredible. Without Elias Paterson, they've scored 2 goals, 1 at even strength, 1 on the power play, and they just can't generate anything. And that power play, even though they snapped the puck around, they had 2 power plays in the first 5 minutes. Like, that could have changed the nature and the tone of that hockey game, and yet they had nothing to show for it, and yet there were the Blues scoring twice on their power play, going 2 for 3 with the man advantage at the end of the night.
Well, and that's the thing, Jeff. Without Elias Pettersson and given the state of your goaltending and defense, a scoreless game 30 minutes through, like, that's the formula. That's the recipe without Elias, and weren't able to capitalize. Let me ask you about Ekman-Larsson. We've talked a lot about the Canucks defense. They don't have a lot of top 4 guys. Luke Schenn plays there with Hughes, but, it's more a security blanket thing. Is Oliver Ekman-Larsson a top 4 defenseman still in the National Hockey League? Or are we starting to see a guy slip into third pair territory if he's not already there?
He may already be there, but the problem is that they also have Tyler Myers as a $6 million guy as a third pair defenseman, and you just can't. You're seeing that they can't proceed with those 2 guys just as part of their 6-man group. But if they're going to be forced even lower in the lineup, OEL was not very good. He and Schenn, and this is part of the problem. They started the game with Hughes and Myers, and they fall behind, and so then you see some Hughes and Bear, but you only have 6 guys dressed, and so if you're going to play Quinn Hughes with Ethan Bear, you're left with some combinations, and Luke Schenn and Oliver Ekman-Larsson was not it last night. And it's been a tough go for OEL. And it was funny because I was looking at the splits earlier today, and I posted it on Twitter, and it is hard to figure out. OEL has a goal and 11 assists, 12 points, and is +3 in the road games. And at home, no goals, just 2 assists, and it's -15. And we can get into the whole debate, plus minus. I mean, the disparity, it defies an explanation there. Like the team, though, but that's part of it. He has been terrible on home ice, and I don't know if that's them throwing him into a matchup role that he just can't handle anymore. It's funny, like, because a lot of people are starting to try to figure out, like, why do the Canucks perform so poorly at home compared to the road? And I think one working theory, at the very least, is you don't control the matchups on the road, and sometimes you just go out and play hockey. Right? Like, you can try to quick change and on the fly, but you have to understand that there are going to be shifts where your 3rd and 4th line guys are going to be out against Nathan MacKinnon when you're in Colorado. Like, you just can't avoid it. The Avs are trying to get that matchup, and it feels like sometimes those guys lower in the lineup, they dig in a little harder, and they recognize that there's MacKinnon on the other side. Like, there's no option but to play him hard. And it just kind of feels, and Bruce doesn't chase the hard matchup. Like, I think at times that hurt Travis Green, where he really tried to chase the hard matchup at home. And I think that gets into players' heads. And you saw another too many men on the ice penalty last night. I just think on the road, sometimes guys go and play maybe a little more relaxed. And it's not just OEL. I think that goes for this entire team. I have to believe, guys, that JT Miller is a better hockey player than he has shown here in the last month. The Canucks better believe that he's a better hockey player than he has shown here in the last month. But no Elias Pettersson, 2 games in a row where, the opportunity was there for JT Miller to rise up and take it on as a personal challenge. The Blues' best players, Kyrou had a hat-trick, Robert Thomas scored, Kyle Connor scored the other night, Pierre-Luc Dubois had 3 points. The other team's best players are showing up and playing. JT Miller has now gone 10 games without a goal. He has 1 in his last 14 games. You wonder about the home ice problems? JT Miller's gone 9 games without a goal at Rogers Arena. His last goal at home was November the 5th against the Nashville Predators. It's Christmas in a couple of days.
Wow.
He's coming up on 2 months between goals at home. And so they've hitched their wagon to this guy. They committed to him. We saw 99 points from JT Miller a year ago. And right here, right now, he just doesn't look anything like that player from last
Imagine
season.
the universe where they don't sign that contract, Jeff, and we're in negotiations on that deal. We like your player. He's a productive player, but clearly, there are defensive deficiencies. Like the contract negotiation changed dramatically here over these last 3 months as some of his holes in his game have been revealed, right? I mean, They save millions if they're negotiating with JT Miller right now versus last summer.
Your guy's not a center. Our coach can't call him a number one center, and he's minus 11. And the poor, you're quite right, Blake.
He hasn't scored an even strength goal. That goal against Nashville on November 5th, that's his last even strength goal, home or away. The last time he scored at even strength, 6 weeks ago.
Hoaglander is down to Abbotsford.
Yeah, happy birthday to him.
Yeah. He, Dries, and Garland were really good in that one game less. You don't give him a second run at all? Like that's what I sort of wondered. You had something that was going there in Calgary. Give him a shot. It was Calgary, right? Give him a shot in Winnipeg. Give him a shot last night. No dice.
Yep, and so that one comes back to coaching. I mean, that's Bruce's decision. Now, we don't know if there are powers above him that are, making suggestions about who should be in and who should be out. But I still firmly believe that Nils Höglander is a National Hockey Leaguer. He turns 22 today, by the way. It is his birthday, being sent to the farm. But, I think I am guilty of forgetting just how young. This guy came in that COVID season and was just turned 20 years old when he made the club. And that first rookie season was really good. Have there been some ups and downs? Sure there have. He's a young guy. And look, from the 30,000-foot view, a 22-year-old player that is struggling playing in the minors, not a big deal. And I think it does sort of underscore how many prospects just got the, pass go and get straight to the National Hockey League instead of spending a little bit of time in the farm because this team was so bad for so long that all of these prospects were able to be shoved right into the National Hockey League. So on one level, this isn't the worst thing in the world. He was papered down to Abbotsford earlier this season, but he didn't actually go. Now the roster freeze is in place, so I think he's going to play some games in the American Hockey League. But you're so right, Matt. This team without Elias Paterson, struggling to generate offense. You had a line that, for whatever reason, it clicked. And then they came back Saturday, and they didn't use that line. And then last night, Hoaglander gets scratched before Lane Peterson, Sheldon Dries, Jack Studnicka, Nils Amon, who has been a nice story and some found money, but he's a raw rookie in the NHL. I don't know that he has to play every single game. And this wasn't done for roster reasons. Paterson's still in the roster, even though he hasn't played. So it wasn't like they had to send somebody down to get Elias Paterson activated if he's healthy and ready to go. This was just a club decision to send Nils Höglander to the minors. And the other part of that is, and I haven't been with you guys since Patrick Allvin did his after hours, he played that card about the sixth youngest team in the National Hockey League. And he kind of leaned into that a couple of times. And on opening night, I believe they were. I think I read that somewhere. So I'm not doubting his facts. But it's now 2 games before Christmas. Podkolzin in the minors. Rathbone in the minors. Nils Höglander in the minors. They are not the sixth youngest team in the National Hockey League. And even when they were, those 3 guys couldn't get into this lineup on a regular basis. So, you run with 3 defensemen on a nightly basis who are all in their 30s now. And yet you're still trying to trumpet this idea that you're the 6th youngest team. So there's a couple things there that don't jive necessarily. I hope that Nils Höglander goes down and embraces this as an opportunity to play a bunch and, gets his confidence back. But it is kind of hard to reconcile with this notion that a week ago in Calgary, we're all raving about how well he was playing at the NHL level. And then he comes out of the lineup and then he gets sent down to the farm.
Jeff, we're going to leave it there, but we'll catch up with you again tomorrow. Quite right. There's been some inexplicable stuff, and Podkolzin, Höglander, and Rathbone, as we talked about earlier in the show. It's a little bit dispiriting on top of everything that's going on home ice and with the club. Thank you for this, my friend. Until tomorrow.
All right, guys. Thanks.